5 seconds to the open. Ready?
Who wants to get this thing started right about now?
Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly with your host, Jerry Robinson.
Welcome.
Not just some guru.
Oh, really?
Your host is an economist and a best-selling author.
What an interesting news item. I'd better write that down.
And just someone who likes to make money and help you to make money. Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly. And here he is, Jerry Robinson.
Friends, welcome to you all around the world. Welcome to Follow the Money Radio. So grateful to have you along for the ride. We are back after a couple of weeks break. We had to take a little hiatus. It's the middle of the summer, and we decided to take a little bit of a break, but we're so happy to be back and continuing our series now that we'd started just a few weeks ago, which was based on a topic we had conducted at our latest Follow the Money Summit 2018 right here in Fayetteville, Arkansas back in May. The topic was charting the course, charting your course, moving forward. And we had talked about that word course, and we had broken it up into an acronym, C standing for commitment. And are you committed to your goals? We had talked about that in a recent podcast. The O stands for overhead. Overhead is often the primary reason why many businesses fail, and why many households in their finances run into so many issues is because they have more month than they have money, right? They run out of money by the end of the month because the overhead is so high. Then we talked about the word U. That was our last podcast, and U stands for unlearn. So that was a really hairy topic we had gotten into. Unlearning is, of course, a really important thing for us to do because most of the financial education that we have received here in the United States or wherever you may be in the West listening to this podcast is based upon what the bankers want you to know. So you end up getting a financial education from the banks and the financial institutions, and that's not really in your best interest. So we had talked about how to unlearn from that. And now today, we're moving into the topic of the letter R, which stands for reserve. And so the question we want to talk about today is specifically, is your reserve full or empty? Now, when we talk about reserve, what we're talking about is primarily financial savings. You know, if you're familiar with our 5 levels of financial freedom, which anybody can access by going to followthemoney.com/5 levels, you know that we encourage everyone to build a liquid cash reserve. At all times, it's very important to have access to a liquid cash reserve. And for many people, they say, well, Jerry, that sounds great in theory, but I just don't earn enough. I don't make enough money to be able to save and have a nice cash reserve. That would be great. I wish I could. That sounds great, but this podcast isn't for me. Well, that's not true. That's what I want to break in your mind right now, is the fact that no, you can. In fact, everyone can. And in fact, even those who often have healthy incomes who really could save, many of those people don't save either. So I'm talking to you as well. Anyone who does not have a solid liquid cash reserve ready at all times in the event of an emergency, that's what we're talking about today. And when we talk about our cash reserve, we specifically refer to in our book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, and also in the 5 levels of financial freedom on our website, we talk about the importance of building a 6-month liquid cash savings reserve. Now, let's break that apart. It's a mouthful. 6-month liquid cash reserve. Let's break it apart. First of all, when we say 6 months, what we mean is 6 months of income. So if you work at a job and you get paid $30,000 per year, then what you ideally need to have in the bank at all times before you begin investing and before you start going out and trying to start a business or whatever the case might be, whatever you're wanting to do, the very first step is to build 6 months of liquid savings. to keep that 6 months of income. So that would be $15,000 in the bank at all times if you earn $30,000. Now, what if you earn $50,000? Well, in that case, it would be $25,000 that you would want to have in the bank. Now, and I say in the bank, we also encourage you to diversify that income. So you don't want to just put it all in the bank and leave it all in cash. Ideally, you would diversify it. And in fact, there's another free article we have that you can look at on this topic. We did a study on this. You can go to followthemoney.com/DSL, and that stands for Diversified 6-Month Liquid Savings Reserve. And what that talks about is the importance of taking that 6 months of liquid savings that you have. And by the way, when I say liquid, I'm referring to just, it's money in the bank. It's money that you can tap. It's not locked away. There's no one saying you can't have access to it. It's money that you can touch and use. It's what we call liquidity in the world of finance. And by diversifying the savings that you have, what you're doing is you're preventing all of the different eroding factors on money from just kind of not allowing that savings to grow. So in other words, if you throw it into the bank and you earn like negative 2% on it, like they are over in Europe, or here you're basically earning nothing on your savings account, well, that's not really going to grow at all. But if you diversified that money, maybe put some in foreign currencies, maybe put another third in U.S. dollars, maybe put another third in precious metals. You have a diversified plan going on there, and that way you're safe, not just your investments. People say you need to diversify your investments. Oh, it's so true. But you also need to diversify your savings.
And some people may think, Jerry, that when we say diversify the savings into things like foreign currency or maybe precious metals, they would view that as investing. But does somebody living in the UK, for example, view holding their bank account in the pound, the British pound, do they view that as investing? Does somebody living in Japan who is holding yen in their wallet, do they view that as investing? Of course not. And so that's what we mean. We mean stable foreign currencies. This is not an investment. It makes sense when you think of it from that perspective because the dollar fluctuates based on, and other currencies fluctuate. And so when you diversify your savings, based on our study, you're a lot better off in the long run.
You really are. I mean, you're basically not exposed to just what the dollar is doing. And if you've looked at a chart of the dollar, you can see over time that it has been going down. So to protect yourself from a declining dollar over time, one way to do that is to, have foreign currencies. Now, like Jennifer just said, you can have foreign currencies and it's not an investment. We're not talking about Forex trading. We're not talking about getting in and out and, trading foreign currencies and all that. No, just literally holding them. And by the way, you don't even have to hold the physical currency. You can actually just buy an ETF. So for all of our members, we have a currency ratings that we keep constantly for all of our members. In fact, if you're a current member, you can go to followthemoney.com/currency ratings. And there you can see which currencies that we like right now. And we update those every single weekend. And so every weekend we look at the broad foreign exchange market. We look for currencies that are currently in uptrends. And that's where we want to be with our savings. And then, of course, if we want to invest in them as well, we can. But saving and investing is very, very, very different. And I want to make sure that's really clear here, is that we're not in any way, shape, or form talking about investing today. When we talk about the reserve, we are talking about saving. Saving. And in fact, so few people today actually save money. I was just looking at the latest personal savings rate percent here in the United States, and it was right around 3.2%. That's so unbelievably dramatically low. I mean, that's even lower than it was just a few years ago when people were kind of panicked about the 2008 crash. You saw savings rates, move up to 7, 8%. Maybe they were 6, 5% for a while, 5 or 6%. But then over the last, maybe a couple of years, we've seen a complacency set back in. Now we're back to the levels that we were prior to, or almost to the levels we were prior to the 2008 crash. That complacency sets in. So I want to encourage you that in this time today, in 2018, here we are in the middle of 2018, where the stock market has been roaring higher. There's a lot of debt, new debt that's going on, lots of leverage everywhere. Everybody's borrowing. There's just we're moving back into a time of complacency again. And now is the time, more than any other time, for while the sun is shining, to be patching those holes, patching those holes in the roof, because it is going to rain again. And when it rains, you don't want to be caught off guard. You don't want to be caught off guard with a maxed out visa and no money in the bank to take care of an emergency. And then suddenly we end up with a 2008 crash. And then you have to do what 25% of Americans did back then when they had to cash out their 401ks at the absolute bottom of the market because they had no cash. So they had to tap their retirement accounts. Saving is so vitally important. Many people will say, Jerry, having 6 months of liquid savings just sounds so unreasonable. Well, I'll tell you what's unreasonable is putting your emergencies on a visa and then having to pay them out for 20 years. That's unreasonable. You know what else is unreasonable? Having to tap your retirement account because you don't have enough cash to take care of an emergency. That's unreasonable. What's not unreasonable is having some money in the bank.
And a lot of people think that saving, and honestly, me included, the topic of saving and actually saving money can be a little bit boring. It can be a slow process. It can also actually go rather quickly if you have a correct strategy in place. It doesn't have to go slowly. But if you change your mindset a little bit, just like we talked about on the last podcast of unlearning different things that we've learned in the past that may not be proper, unlearning to think about saving in that boring way, Jerry, and maybe think of it as trying to profit the most. How do people change their mindset to look at savings as actually profiting?
And that brings us to our profit principle. And this is a new way of thinking about savings. Now, if you've heard me talk about the profit principle before, you'll get another review of it today. But for those of you who've never heard this, I really want to encourage you, because the profit principle that I'm going to describe to you right now literally changed my financial life. When I first started trying to save a percentage of my own income many years ago, I became easily discouraged. Something would always come up every month to prevent me from putting money back into this reserve that I was trying to build of 6 months. And it wasn't until I learned what I call now the profit principle that I truly became motivated to save money. So what is the profit principle? Let me explain. Several years ago, while I was reading the Bible, I was reading through the book of Proverbs. If you've never read the book of Proverbs, it's a really interesting book. Some of you may not even read the Bible, but I tell you, there's two books that are really interesting to read, even if you're not a reader of the Bible. The book of Proverbs is filled with very interesting, wise principles. And the book of Ecclesiastes is just a hoot to read through. It's just a really quite an amazing book. So I would encourage anyone who has never really read the Bible just to pick up the Bible and read those two books. They're very interesting. But in the book of Proverbs, specifically in the chapter 14, verse 23, I read a verse, and I probably read this verse many times, but I'd never seen this before. Do you ever have that happen to you? It just literally jumped off the page at me. And it says this in Proverbs 14:23, "In all labor there is profit." In all labor there is profit. That phrase kept rolling around in my mind, and I was aware of what the definition of the word profit was. I mean, it was essentially the amount of income left over after all of your expenses. So it's what's left over, right? It's the net income on the financial statement line. It's kind of like the bottom line. And it was at that moment that I discovered the profit principle. So the profit principle is, in essence, this: an individual's profit from his labor or work is equal to the money that he saves, equal to the amount of money that he saves. In mathematical terms, we could write it like this: profit in your financial life, in your household, profit equals savings from your labor. Profit equals savings. The profit principle literally blew my mind, because I realized that each month that I did not save money from my paycheck as I went to work, and I was working working hard every day, getting my paycheck at every 2 weeks. And when I would look back and I would say, now how much money did I save from all the money that they paid me? And I was realizing I wasn't saving. I didn't save any money. And so if I didn't save any money, then what this profit principle was telling me was that I was working for a zero profit rate, right? I didn't earn any profit from my labor. So I was working hard for this corporation. They were giving me a check. And then what I was doing is I was taking that check and I was giving it to all of these different corporations. I was giving it to the utility company. I was giving it to the mall. I was giving it to the electric company. I was giving it to the telephone company. I was giving it to the cable company. I was giving it to, for my rent or for my mortgage. I was giving it to the bank. But who did all the work? I did, right? And how much money was there available to me in the event that I had an emergency? Nothing, right? This was when I fully realized that anyone who does not save basically works for zero profit. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Who in their right mind would do that? Apparently I did for a long time. Today, large corporations operate their businesses for maximum profit. Small business owners are dependent upon their profits too to survive and thrive. So why shouldn't you view your job any differently? Would you ever agree to work at a job without earning a profit? I mean, that would be ludicrous. Yet millions of Americans work for zero profit because they save nothing at the end of the month. They take a corporate paycheck and then they turn around and give all the money from that paycheck back to other corporations. That is really tough. And to make matters worse, many Americans not only earn zero profit from their labor because they don't save, but they actually agree to give away all of their profits to credit card companies and other corporations that then charge them interest. And so then they end up owing more than what they had actually made. So they're actually upside down and they're earning money, but they don't have anything to show for it.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I didn't realize it at the time, but I found out later, probably as an older teenager, that there was a really good example of a family in my town who operated according to this zero profit principle. And in fact, not only were they doing that, but apparently they were being a burden on their family members as well because they were asking for money to borrow. So here's basically the story. There were friends of the family, of my family, and the mom and dad, the husband and wife, had the exact same jobs as my parents. They were both teachers in the same town. But yet, if you just looked at their home and their lifestyle and their belongings in isolation from knowing what they did for a living, you would have thought they had completely different jobs. Maybe they owned a big business. They looked much richer than my family. It always kind of confused me a little bit. I just thought that maybe they got lots of gifts or something, or that my parents were just not spending as much as them. I thought, how are they richer than us? But come to find out, one of their family members explained to my mother later on down the line that every single month this family was borrowing from their own parents in order to pay the bills at the end of the month. And so they were operating according to actually a negative profit principle because they were agreeing that they would pay back the family members later on down the line too. So they were earning zero profit, in other words, not saving, obviously, but then they were owing all of this money to family members too. And so that's an example of how operating with no profit can perhaps put you in a place of being a burden upon family members too. And then looking richer, having all the belongings that make you look like you're more wealthy is just a facade. It's just an illusion because there was no profit in the picture.
Yeah, there was no way to take care of and maintain all of those things had there been an emergency because they were probably leveraged. I mean, so when you think about this, how is this not a form of just straight up voluntary financial slavery? It's just voluntary financial slavery. What we do today, it's the way the system is set up. And this financial strategy of the profit principle will help you take back the most basic of your fundamental financial rights. If you have any financial right whatsoever in this world, it's your right to earn a profit from your labor, right? And so that's what that verse says in Proverbs 14:23. In all labor there is profit. In profit, it's not saying in all labor there is money. It doesn't say in all labor there is cash. No, in all labor there is profit. That means there is money left over, right? Money left over for you. And that's not the case today. In fact, the way it works today is that the corporations and the credit card companies and the banks and the financial institutions, they're the ones who earn your profit from your labor. And that shouldn't be. That's why we have such a jacked up system today. That's why we have a national debt that's well over $21 trillion. That's why we have deficits with all of these different countries. That's why we have growing debt at the state level. That's why credit card debt is at near all-time highs, why mortgage debt is near all-time highs, why student loan debt's near all-time highs, because we have been duped into this idea that we don't have to profit from our labor. We just go work, and then as long as we got a Visa card, well, then everything's going to be okay, right? But that's not how it works. That's not how it works. Are you currently making a profit from your labor? Or are you giving it away to the corporations who have deceived you into believing that you cannot survive without all of their stuff, right? It's a matter of thinking through this process and thinking, am I earning a profit from my labor? So now that we've had this awakening, now that we've had this talk and we realize that, the Joneses are broke, so let's not emulate them. Let's not try to keep up with the Joneses. Let's what do we need to do? What's the next step? Well, after you decide that you're ready to start earning a profit from your labor and putting away that profit so that you can have a savings, which eventually, once that savings grows to 6 months of liquidity, so 6 months of income, then you can use the excess of that to start investing. So you can break free financially. You can be an investor. You can be an investor very shortly if you will just commit to begin to save money. So after you decide it's time to start earning a profit from your labor, the next step is to determine your desired monthly profit rate, right? So, unless you live in your parents' basement rent-free, however, it's virtually impossible to have a profit rate of 100%. Right? You're going to have to live somewhere. You're going to have to eat, right? You're going to have transportation somehow. You're going to have to clothe yourself. So, of course, you're going to have costs. But personally, I believe the minimum amount that anyone should save as their profit is 15% of monthly income. If you look at corporations, they strive for a decent profit rate. If you look at small businesses, they're looking for a decent profit rate. How about 15% for your household? Why not have a 15% profit rate? They said that's what we do every single month. And some people would say, well, why not 10 or why not 5? Well, 15% is what many financial advisors are now beginning to recommend because of all of the eroding factors on money. So I would recommend that you begin by setting aside your profit, your savings, at a rate of about, 10% and then slowly raise it to 15%. If you're currently not saving anything at all, saving 10% might seem outrageous. If that's the case, then why not start with 1%? Why not just start with 1%? Right. If you're not saving anything at all, why not just say, you know what, I won't even notice it. It'll be a small little 1% of my total income. You may notice it if you look at it too long, if you really obsess about it and start thinking. But really, when you think about it, 1% of your total income, let's just set it aside every single month. And then you know what? After you do that, and you're not getting your car repossessed and you're not getting foreclosed upon, then guess what? You can do it to 2%. You can raise it to 2%. And then you can keep creeping up until your profit rate is, 15, 20%, wherever you can get it to. If you look at Asian countries, for example, over in China, their savings rates over there are close to 30 or 40%. So they're saving 30 to 40% of their income. So if they can do that, why can't we? Why can't we try to save more money? And I think that's really, really an important topic that, like Jennifer said, she put it so well, it is a boring topic for many people. But when you think about it in terms of profit rate, then suddenly it's like, well, am I earning a profit?
Right. It starts to get a little bit exciting when you think about it in terms of profit, almost like you're running a business when you sit down to do your monthly budget. And Jerry, I just wanted to very quickly share just a few ways. There are so many different ways that you can start saving more of your income each month. But I'll go over a couple of my favorite ways. But first, I wanted to distinguish one thing, and that is the word saving versus spending less. Okay, so saving actually means you take money and you keep it. You keep it in your bank account or in your hand or in your home. Saving, that's what saving is. Spending less is when you were maybe spending $200 on groceries every month and now you're only spending $150. That's spending less. When you go into a department store and they tell you that the more you buy, the more you save. Well, that's pretty silly when you really think about. I mean, and a lot of people, that gets into their minds. In fact, that's my first way to save money, is to just avoid shopping traps altogether, because they will tell you that you're going to be saving all kinds of money when you spend it at their store. How many times have you seen that? You see it everywhere in the retail space and online everywhere too. So that's a distinction that Jerry and I, we often joke about it even, is that we say, oh, we saved money at this restaurant. And then we look at each other and say, well, no. We spent less by using this coupon.
Yeah, the corporations have a vested interest in having you think about that as saving. So you say, oh, yeah, I'm a saver. I save money because I shop at this. No. You didn't save any money when money comes out of your pocket. If money ever comes out of your pocket and goes to the cashier, you did not save money. You spent money.
Right. Now, spending less is a good thing in general, as long as you are not just spending more and more so that you can spend less and less, then that's generally a good thing. So, but the first way that we like to save money and to increase our profit rate is, like I said earlier, to avoid so many shopping traps. And we have a big article with 11 specific ways to avoid shopping traps, and that's in the show notes on today's podcast, so you can go check that out and get 11 different ways to avoid shopping traps. For example, never ever, regardless of the scenario, regardless of how good the deal is, never ever getting the store credit card. That's just one example, because you might get some kind of great interest-free thing. You might get 10% off, it's always a great deal, isn't it? It's always an amazing deal. And all you have to do is pay it off next month. But you almost always, I would almost guarantee you're going to end up spending more money at that store than you would have if you hadn't got the store credit, because they're going to get you on their mailing list now and send you all kinds of amazing offers. So that's just one example of that article with 11 ways to avoid detrimental shopping traps and help you literally save more money if you can avoid those shopping traps. Second way to help boost your monthly savings is an interesting way that is not for everyone, but if you are someone who has to buy their own health insurance that is not through your workplace, or like you don't have a big plan, a group health insurance plan, and you have to go get an individual plan. Jerry and I used to do this, and we were paying $1,000 a month as of January of 2018 for 4 healthy people to have health insurance. And we switched over to a health sharing plan. And the specific company we use is called Christian Healthcare Ministries. There are a few others out there that would also be worth looking at, but that's the specific one we use, and it's amazing. Imagine if you're out there paying a lot of money for health insurance, then if you're like Jerry and I, you can literally save $500 a month. That's how much, or I guess we are spending less. We were spending $1,000. Now we're spending about $475 every month. And of course, this is not, disclaimer, this is not technically health insurance, but it does count as being you're involved in a healthcare plan for the individual mandate, even though I think that's going away sometime soon. It's not actually health insurance, but it's a pretty good deal if you ask me. We're members and we're saving a lot of money. And I'll just give you one example of the person who actually told us about this health sharing ministry. His wife has been hospitalized 3 times, and they're a part of the same ministry we are part of, Christian Healthcare Ministries. And she's been hospitalized 3 times. And Jerry, guess how much they've paid for each one of those hospitalizations? $0. $0. I like that. I think that's a really, really good deal. And it works for us anyway. Like I said, it's not for everyone. Something to go check out and do a lot of research on before you take the plunge. But it works for us. And then finally, making your own gifts. We've said this many, many times, but just think about how much you spent last Christmas or on a year's worth of birthdays for friends and family. And imagine if you could spend a fraction of that on some raw materials to make your own gifts instead of going out at the very last minute and, buying a $50 gift card or some really expensive gift that the person may or may not even like. So that's one thing we've implemented is making our own gifts instead of giving our money to the corporations. We make it a heartfelt gift that costs a lot less money.
Yeah, and those are just a few ways that you can implement this. The point of this being that anyone can really sit down, think about what they're currently spending, and figure out how can I cut my spending, and then begin to put some of that money back into reserve to build that 6-month liquid cash reserve. And once you do, you're going to be miles ahead of most Americans. You will be able to weather many of life's storms without having to resort to credit cards or loans from family or loans from friends. So not only if you build up a 6-month liquid pool of savings, it may take you a little bit of time, but when you do, you know what else is going to happen? You're going to be a better investor when you get there, because good savers make even better investors and better traders. You know why? Because people who have money in the bank, they don't feel the constant need to take on excessive risks and to swing for the fences with every trade or with every investment. It's a hugely important thing. So good savers make even better investors. So I want to strongly, strongly encourage you to really think about where we are right now in the economic cycle, realizing that many people are not prepared for an emergency. And if you're one of those people, then now is the time to begin building a savings reserve. Before we bring this to a close, I want to tell you I saw an interesting story just recently in Bloomberg, and Bloomberg, the financial media outlet. And it was a report that they had put out that showed that the percentage of Americans with some savings, but not enough to cover 3 months' worth of expenses, rose to 22% in 2017. That is 22% of Americans who could not cover 3 months' worth of expenses, 22%. And in fact, if you look at how many people actually have 6 months of expenses or greater in savings, you're talking about less than 30%. So less than 1 out of 3 people are actually in a place to be able to take care of 6 months of expenses. That's just 1 out of 3. And that number is actually declining. That number has gone down from 31%. There were a couple of other interesting facts, and we'll link this story in the show notes today from Bloomberg. But I saw a couple of other interesting facts from this story. Number one was about a third of U.S. families have no wealth or negative wealth outside the value of their home. There's a lot of stories recently about how much value homes have today. I think Americans are sitting on about $5.4 trillion worth of home value. And that sounds great. But, about a third of U.S. families have no wealth outside of the value of their home. And another fact that I saw that was fairly interesting in the story was that 30% of younger boomers aged 54 to 63, they're just kind of nearing that retirement age. They're right before retirement, pre-retirees. 30% of them have no emergency savings whatsoever. And why is that important? Because that's the largest number we have seen from pre-retirees in any generation since we've been recording this number. So 30% of younger boomers have nothing in the form of emergency savings. That is a disaster waiting to happen. What can you do? We've talked about several things you can do. Let's wrap it up and summarize. Number one, automate your savings. Just automatically do it. Just go ahead and have your HR department, if you work at work, maybe they'll take out money from your check and put it right into your savings account. That way you don't even have to think about it. Just automate the savings. Make it automatic. Another thing you can do is start with 1%. Save 1% of your income if it's tough right now to save money, and then work your way up to 15% of your total income every single paycheck. You will not regret it. Another thing you can do is diversify that savings. Don't keep it all in U.S. dollars. Maybe diversify it out into some foreign currencies, some stable foreign currencies, or maybe even put it in some precious metals. Diversify your savings so that you can beat back the eroding factors on money. And then the last thing I would say is do not delay. You have no time to wait. Start today. All right, friends, well, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for tuning in and allowing us into your life each and every week right here on this broadcast. And as always, I like to leave you with a final word, this time taken from the book of Proverbs, chapter 6, where the Bible gives us some admonition on the importance of saving and having a profit rate. When it says in verse 6, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, and consider her ways and be wise." It continues on, "Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, the ant prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest." Isn't it amazing how God's creation, even as small as the ant, knows the importance of preparing for adverse days ahead, even if that adversity simply means cold weather? How much more so, too, friends, that we need to be prepared in all circumstances, especially in this uncertain economy that we live in. And that's just something to think about. Remember, when you want the truth, just follow the money. Have a safe and prosperous week, and we'll see you right back here next time. Until then, God bless.
The information contained on the Follow the Money podcast is strictly for informational and educational purposes. It should not be construed as specific investment advice. The views and opinions of our guests and sponsors, including Tom Cloud, are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of FTMDaily.com or Robinson Media Group, LLC. Jerry Robinson does hold an insurance license and at times may offer consulting on life insurance and fixed retirement income products. Follow-up, individualized responses to email or phone requests that involve the rendering of personalized investment advice for compensation will not be made absent compliance with state investment advisor registration requirements or an applicable exemption or exclusion and applicable insurance regulations. Past performance is not indicative of future results. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on the podcast. Remember, never do your financial planning through podcast or radio. It's your money. Be wise. Do your due diligence and always consult a trusted financial professional before making any financial decisions.